Hi everyone, this is Roger Well from Invoice and welcome to the E3 training for invoices. We'll get started in just a few seconds here. I see attendees still getting signed on, so I'm going to let that stabilize for a few more seconds. Okay, good afternoon everyone. This is Roger Well with Invoice, and we're in our last session of the day. This is for invoicing for Invoice 3 or E3. The first thing I want to do is go over the agenda, and then we'll jump into the training. The main items to cover today during the invoices training will be the invoices summary page, which is a primary submodule within the finance module. Creating and submitting an invoice from a vendor's perspective. We're going to look at the online or user interface method as well as the electronic invoicing method. Number 3 will be reviewing an invoice and looking at the actions of approving or rejecting from the owner's perspective. And then finally, we'll talk about how the expenditures impact the overall financial plan and balance associated with that area of concern or project. Okay, I have logged in as a vendor user, and I'm going to give a little bit of a refresher, and then we'll jump right into the invoices training. So the first thing I'll remind everyone of is, in order to see information about the actual project or the site, I would come to my site summary submodule. And here, depending on whether I'm at the area of concern level or the site level, I'll see different information. At the area of concern level, we have the AOC summary. So I can see that what the AOC name is, the status of the AOC. In order for work orders and invoices to be able to be approved, the status has to be active on that AOC. So that's why I'm showing you that the status is active, the type of project that it is, the phase that it's in, and other information about it. So that would be the AOC summary. If I want to go up to the site level, I would click on the site link, and now I have my site summary. I actually have a photo log here that I can go through and look at the site information or the metadata about the site. And of course, I have all the other information as well. The contacts for the site, the documents, the points of interest, sensor receptor surveys, the additional information fields, any agreements, third-party property agreements in the history about the site. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use my left panel, and I'm going to open up some of my bookmarks. And I'm going to go to my proposals list by clicking a bookmark. So that's the proposals list for a specific project, which is site 342 and the remediation work going on. And then I'll close my panel. Here I can see the approved proposals that have work orders associated with them, and the status, and then the dollar amounts of the proposal as well as the approved invoice amount. Okay. If I have already invoiced and I'm just looking for invoices from my company, I could go into Finance and I'm going to scroll, move my cursor down to the Invoices submodule, and then I want to look at the Invoices page. So this is the main invoice screen or page. We only have one invoice, but here's the invoice number. I'm only going to be seeing invoices for my company, right? Because remember, I'm signed in as the vendor user. The type is either going to be an I for an invoice, a C for a credit memo, or an RI for a reconciliation invoice, or an RC for a reconciliation credit. So that's what the type is. The payee, the status of the invoice, the invoice date. So that is the date that the vendor puts on their invoice. The work order that it belongs to, the submitted date, that's the date that it's submitted into Invoice. The invoice amount, pre-tax, if there's tax, that's segregated here, and then the invoice total, and then there's a list of actions that are available to me. Okay, so that is the information that you would see at the summary level for all of your invoices for that particular project. You have a filter. So if I have a long list of invoices through time on a project, I can go into my filter and I can filter on various attributes, maybe the status of the invoices, maybe the reconcile. If I'm a project manager at the owner company, I might want to look for just specific vendors' invoices. So I could do that. And then we have a date ranges, invoice date range, submitted date range, approval date range, and then a minimum amount. Okay, so that would be if I want to set a filter in order to filter my primary invoice page and the tabular output of that. And then I could turn once I set a filter, I can turn it on or turn it off by clicking the turn on, turn off button. Okay. I can add invoices from this screen if I would like. So I can do a credit memo or an invoice, and then I can just hit add. And now I could start the process of entering invoices. Okay, I'm going to actually cancel that because that's not the normal way that most people would initiate the invoice. In the landing page for your invoices, you have your actions. And we really don't have too many on an existing approved invoice. This one is waiting for GL process, which means it's already been approved in Invoice. As an administrator, I have the ability to do some things, but most users would not. You would be able to export it if you wanted to actually download that into a file format, but that would really be about it. If it was in the rejected status, you would be able to edit it and resubmit it from an action item, as an example. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is show you kind of how a consultant user might actually start the process of invoicing. So the first question you might ask would be, when I first log into Invoice, I want to go to my reports, and I would have probably already created a report favorite for my open work orders. I would have saved it as a report favorite, which I have done here. to work release or work order summary report. And I'm going to come over and just hit run. This kind of tells me what's going to be in the report output, but I'll hit run again at the bottom. And it's running a report for me that's going to give me a list of all of my open work orders. Okay, so here's the report output. I have 2 open work orders because each open work order is a row of its own. These are links, so I can navigate to the site, I can navigate to the work order, but I can see all the basic information about it. The description, so one's a preliminary assessment, one's a phase 2. This is my company, Environmental Consultant Inc. My work order status, these are open or invoicing, so that's what I had asked for in my report. The approval dates, the work order amount, the approved invoice amount, and then my open amount, how much is left. Okay, because I can see there's $7,500 left in the first work order and $5,620 in the second. Okay, and there's some additional information in there as well. But from that, I probably would decide which one of these I'm ready to invoice. Okay, so I could go to my first one and click it. And it's going to ask me to open in a new tab or just open here, which would replace my report tab. So I'm going to open it in a new tab. Okay. So what I have now, I have 2 tabs open. I have my report, and I can go back. You know, if I have 10 open work orders or 20, I'm going to have them all in tabular format here, and I can just keep opening them to do my invoicing. But in my example here, I created a new tab for work order 244775. Okay, so that takes me there. I can look at the information about that work order before I'm ready to invoice. I can look at all the invoices that are associated with this work order, and to date there aren't any. So what we're going to do now is we're going to manually create an invoice for this work order. So I've already navigated to the right site and project, and I'm going to come up to finance, and I'm going to click proposal, and I'm going to click on invoice for that work order out of my action item. Okay, so this is my first screen for entering invoice data manually into Invoice. So I'm going to give it an invoice number. I'm going to tell the system, is it an invoice or a credit memo? And remember, Invoice doesn't not allow these to be mixed. A single transaction can either be a credit or a debit, but cannot have line items that are doing some debiting and others doing some crediting. It has to be either an invoice or a credit memo. My work order automatically populates. My company name populates. I may have permissions to change the payee. If I do, I'll have a change payee button. Normally, well, it's going to always default to my company, but if for some reason this may be a laboratory invoice that I'm going to enter, it's under my work order as the consultant, but our customer is going to pay the lab direct. In that case, I would hit change payee and select the laboratory. That's one example. Okay. So the next few fields are going to be my invoice date. It populates to today's date, the work start and work end date. So I'm going to say this is for my January 1 through January 31 invoice. So even though it's dated 2/3, that's going to be my invoice date. The work period is January 1 through January 31. Transaction type is not mandatory. Actually is not really filled out at all. That usually comes in on reconcile transactions only. It's not going to hurt you to put anything in there because it's not going to roll up to the file that gets sent to the customer's accounting system. The vendor comments, I can put some comments in here or some notes about this invoice. Okay. The system knows it's me that's preparing this invoice, so it's got the vendor's name there, and it also is picking up the project manager automatically from the work order. So it knows that Roger Well is my customer, and it picked that up automatically. Then I have my work order details, the work order number, the work order amount, how much has been approved, the total invoiced, is retainage being used, what's been retained so far. At this point, I want to move forward to the next step, so I'm going to hit Add Details. Okay, so there's a few things here that look a little different, some new information. One is I'm introducing this concept of a side tab within the screen. This is giving me some information. It's telling me that the work order open amount is $5,901. And so far, I haven't entered anything. As I enter money on my invoice, this total is going to update. Okay. So I have both T&M and units that I can invoice. Depending on the settings, I'm going to have different levels of a work breakdown structure to enter. In my example here, we have our settings made so that only the work breakdown, only the phases that were in the work order can be invoiced. Okay, so even though there may be 10 other phase choices available, only one is available in the invoice because that's what was approved for the work order. And then the bottom level is the cost component. So maybe I'm going to bill some direct labor under my T&M, and I can put in some money here and hit Add. Okay, and as I'm adding that, a few things are happening. One is the work order open amount is declining. The net total is increasing. So now I'm at a $500 invoice that I'm working on. I can see that for my preliminary assessment, my balance is still $3,500. And this is the $500 that I'm getting ready to invoice. And obviously I can add more. Maybe I have some equipment and I have $150 to add to that. Okay. So my totals are being updated, and now I have two lines. I have a direct labor and an equipment line. I can also bill my units. So I have, for my preliminary assessment phase and my on-site assessment activity, we have a junior hydrogeologist and a senior hydrogeologist. This tells me, as the vendor, how many hours or units I still have left to bill. And it tells me my unit price. The ticket number is an optional field. That would be a timesheet number or some other job order ticket if it's required. But in this case, it's not required, so I can skip it. And I can put in my quantity of hours to bill. So I'm going to put in 5, and I'm going to put in 100. Okay. Now, when I put in 100, even though I only have 10 left, it did the calculation. There's $14,000, and I get a big red mark here saying work order units will be overspent by $12,244. Okay. The whole work order will be overspent by $9,000. So that's, I'm getting flagged there if I miskeyed or misentered. So in reality, I just want to bill my 10. Okay, now as I did that, you can see it updated. I'm at 1,400. So I can see my T&M subtotal of 650, and I can see my unit total of 1,850, and my total invoice amount of $2,500. Okay. At this point, I have some options. I can cancel and back out all of my work and lose it. I can go ahead and add my backup document to the invoice. I could save this work, which is going to put the invoice in a new status, and I can come back to it later. Or I could go ahead and submit it now. Now, depending on your customer's rules that they have set in Invoice, you may not be able to submit it without a backup document. That's another configuration in Invoice that varies by customer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add the document. So give me 1 second here. All right, so I've entered my hours and I've entered my dollar amounts. I'm going to go ahead and click Add Document. That takes me to my document management section for this invoice. I'm going to come over to my desktop and bring in my invoice backup document and then upload it. Okay, there's my invoice. It's a PDF, so it's an image of my invoice. And now I can hit Save or Submit. Normally I would hit Submit because I'm ready to send it to the customer, but I'm going to do Save just for the training purposes. So I've saved that, and takes me back to the screen that I had prior to my last click when I hit Add Documents, and I'll go ahead and hit Save one more time. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over into my invoicing submodule, and you can see that's the invoice that we've been working on. It's invoice RW001. It's in the new status. It has not been submitted yet, and it has the basic information about it: the work order it belongs to, and the invoice amount, pre-tax, and the invoice total. So at this point, I could have someone else internally review this to make sure all the information is accurate. I could have someone look at it to confirm there's a backup document. But when we're ready to submit this, I'm going to come to the same screen and click the Submit button. So it gives me a chance to look at everything one more time. I can look at my invoice summary. That's kind of the header. I can look at the contacts. Okay, it's from Max and it's going to Roger. I can look at the work order balance. Okay, so I can see that not including this invoice, I can see how much money is left by item from the invoice. Okay, so my site assessment work, we still have a balance of $1,500. My on-site assessment, we still have a balance of $2,000. And then on the units, we still have a full balance of $2,120. So I can see the balance of the work order. Here are the invoice documents, and that's the backup PDF that we loaded. The invoice details, this is what I'm actually invoicing. Okay, so I have my $650 on my T&M total, and I have $1,850 on my unit total for an invoice of $2,500. So that's the detail. The payment details will be blank because this invoice hasn't been paid yet, obviously. And then the last section is the invoice history. So this will generate all of the history, all the audit trail once this gets submitted and then either approved or rejected. So at this point, I'm ready to submit the invoice. So I'm going to click Submit. And now the invoice is in the reviewing status. See? So it went from new to reviewing. And now my customer is receiving an email alert, and if they go to their action items list, they'll see this invoice for $2,500 on their action items. So what I'm going to do now is log in as the customer. So now I'm logged in as Roger Well, and I'm an employee user. I'm going to go to my action items list, which is my dashboard. And if I'm just logging in the morning, that's where I'm going to be directed anyway. And I see I have an invoice in queue. And it's for project 342.rem. It's from Environmental Consultant Inc. There's the invoice number, there's the work order number, the amount, and then the open balance of the work order. Okay. So that's pretty nice because I can see even if I approve this without going into the detail, I still have $3,120 left in the work order balance. If I have a lot of invoices in queue and I'm ready to approve them all from my action items list, remember I can do that in a bulk action. I can check all the boxes. So I might have 10 invoices here. In my case, I only have one. I can hit my bulk actions, and I can either approve or reject in bulk. Okay, I'm going to just close that and back out of that. Okay, so now in the review phase, the normal workflow would be it would come in to my action item list, and I'm going to click review. It's going to direct me to that site and project where that invoice belongs to, and it's going to take me into the invoices submodule, and it's going to take me to all the detailed information about this invoice. Invoice provides a tip or this blue bar of information to try to give you some instructions on what to do. So it says, please scroll to the bottom to approve or reject. And if I go to the bottom, I see my approve or reject buttons. I also could back out and just hit cancel. When I'm done looking at that message, I can go ahead and close it. Okay. So we have all these sections that make up the invoice. We have an invoice summary. So this is the invoice header information. I won't go through all of it, but there's some pretty good information in here. Comments would be listed. The work order that the invoice is associated with it is listed. The work order amount, total invoiced amount, things like that. So that's my summary. I have my contacts, so I can see who my vendors are that are invoicing. If I'm the first reviewer at the customer company, I'll see my name here. Okay. If the invoice exceeds my invoice approval limit, Invoice is going to automatically escalate it to my invoice next approver that I've established on my preferences, just like E2, same exact functionality. And that invoice will continue to escalate in a pre-approved status until such time a person with the proper authority can approve it. But in my example, I'm going to have enough money to approve it. The work order balance, we looked at that earlier from the vendor's perspective. But as the reviewer of the invoice, I can see that we haven't approved any invoices yet against this work order. So I have the full balance remaining. Okay. If that's not good enough for me when I'm reviewing the invoice, I can open up another tab. I can come over to Finance Proposals, and I can click on the proposal link, look at my proposal details that I'm invoicing against, and then I could split the screen. Okay. So I can have on my right-hand side the actual proposal, approved proposal that this invoice is against. I could even look at the proposal backup document if I wanted over here to review the scope of work and just make sure that what's being invoiced was part of the plan. Okay. So that's a nice way to do a direct comparison. You're reviewing invoice details, against your actual approved proposal. Okay. Now, in my example here, we're not doing task level invoicing. Task level invoicing is an option in Invoice. Task level invoicing would say that based on the supplier's tasks that they build in their scope of work, I also want the supplier to do their invoicing against these tasks. So if that was true, I would have a breakout of my health and safety plan task, which was approved for $1,500, and the supplier would have to invoice against health and safety plan to the proper work breakdown structure. Okay. Some of our customers do task level invoicing, others don't. If you really are looking for the biggest bang for your buck on project management, then you may want to consider invoicing to the task level. That way, all of your actual costs are going to be directly assigned to the task from the approved proposal. All right, so that's an option. I just want to point that out. Otherwise, like in my example, we still have all the financial controls, but they're to the work breakdown structure only, not to the task and work breakdown structure. Okay, but anyway, I wanted to show you another reason why the tabbing and the split screen would come in handy. So I'm going to go ahead and close the proposal, and we're back to full screen on the invoice. Okay, so these are the details I'm looking at, reviewing. I'll close that section. We won't have any payment details yet during the review because it hasn't been approved or rejected. And we also have the invoice history, so I can see when the vendor submitted this. Okay, at this point, I can approve it or reject it. If I want to reject it, I probably would come up to my invoice summary and put in some rejection comments. So I could do that, and I could come back down and click reject. And now that invoice is in the rejected status. Okay. If I come back in as the vendor, I'm going to come back in as Max. Okay, I'm back in as Max now, and it shows up on the vendor's action item list as a rejected invoice. Okay. And what I could do now is I could submit it, void it, or in my case, delete it, even though that won't generally be an option. If I want to edit it, I'm probably going to just click on the invoice itself. I can look at the rejection comments here. And I can edit my details. So maybe I need to take some money out. So I'm going to hit edit. In reality, I'm not going to bill for 10 of those hours. I'm only going to bill for 8. That reduces the amount. And I could add more backup documents. I could save this, or I could go ahead and resubmit. So I'm going to hit resubmit. And as soon as I did that, that puts it back in the reviewing status. And now I'm going to come back in as the customer. So I'm going to come back in as Roger now. I'm the customer reviewer. You can see it's back in the reviewing status. I'm going to click review off my action item list. I'm going to come back through here. I could keep my rejection comments or, from the original rejection, or I could delete them. I could look now at the new invoice. It used to be $2,500. Now it's $22,220. We went from 10 units to 8. Okay, I could look at the backup document again if I wanted by clicking on that. And I think everything looks good. I'm ready to approve it. And it's now off of my action item list. And just to confirm, I'm going to come to Finance Invoices. And that invoice for $2,220 is now in the waiting for GL process. It's going to go out in tonight's scheduled job to the accounts payable system, which will then pay the supplier for their work based on their payment terms. Okay. Okay, the next thing I want to do is talk about electronic invoicing. So for electronic invoicing, we have a page under the admin module, and it's called transfers, and it's called EDI transfer. So if you're a vendor user and you're responsible for uploading invoices, you'll have access to this page. Again, it's under administration. It's in the tool, or I'm sorry, the transfer submodule. And then there's a page called EDI transfer, right? So within this page, you have quite a bit of information. One, if you want to look at your EDI file formats, there's a shortcut to that. You can click here, and this gives you a listing of all the available EDI file formats. So this is the specification that your company would need to create in order to prepare and then upload invoices electronically. Okay, so we provide that information there. Also, you can email your EDI file directly from this page, and it gives you the link to your document server as well as what you need to put in your subject line. Okay, that includes the EDI, and then you can also do your documents as well. All right, now what I do is I just quickly want to show an example of an EDI file that we've already filled out. This is an EDI file that's going to create 3 different invoices against an already established work order for my company. So I won't go through all the details on this, but those of you that are doing this, it's the same exact file that you're currently using for your customer. You have to reference your work order number, your Invoice proposal number, your unique vendor ID, your invoice numbers, and so on. And then you have to use the proper coding for the work breakdown structures, and then the dollar amounts. Okay, so that's the EDI file. I'm going to go ahead and close the file. To upload it, I would come to that page in Administration, Transfers, EDI, and I'm going to hit Browse. And I'm going to grab my file and hit Save. It's processing the electronic file now, and it will give me a message. Okay, and then if I can clear that message, I can come down, I can look at my log. So here I see that on February 3rd at 1:38 Pacific time, I completed it. 3 parsed, 3 submitted. I can click on the submitted link to look at the invoices that were just created from that EDI upload. Okay, so these are the invoices that were just created. I can go back a screen, and if I had some errors, I could see them in the unsubmitted. Here I don't have any errors. So all 3 of my invoices went through properly. Okay. So as an example, we have an invoice. I'm just going to copy this. Okay. So I'll close this tab and then just go to the site summary. So one thing you might want to do is search for an invoice. So I copied that, but I'm going to come to my left panel and I'm going to paste that in. and click on search. The search results show my invoice, what node it's at, i.e. what site or project, the status, and the amount. If I want to go look at that invoice, I'm going to click the link. It's going to navigate me to that site and project and to the finance invoices page. So here's the information. Let me maximize my screen for that invoice that we just created. Okay. Automatically in the comments, it says Invoice EDI. That shows that it was created via EDI and not through the user interface. I have my work order balance, the contacts. The documents can be uploaded now or they could be emailed in, just like the process in E2. So those would be my backup documents. The invoice details. In this case, we're building $500 worth of equipment to the preliminary assessment phase. No units. Looks like it was T&M. And then there'll be an invoice history line for that as well when it was submitted. Okay. So now it's in the reviewing status. If I come to my action items list, you can see these were the 3 invoices that we just created with the EDI file. And if I like all these, I can select them all, go to bulk action, hit approve, continue. It's going to give me one last time to say, do you really want to approve all of those invoices? I'm going to say confirm. And now when I come over into my invoicing submodule for this project, you can see I have all of those invoices now approved and waiting to be sent to the accounts payable system. Okay, so that was vendor EDI invoicing. One last thing that we'll show, and then we'll open it up for some questions. The work order, these invoices are hitting a certain work order. So I've got 4 of the 5 invoices for this area of concern are all to the same work order. It ends in 609. So if I come over, if I click on that work order, it's going to direct me to the details about that work order, but now I can see all of the invoices just to that work order. So now we've got $16,975 of expenditure that's been approved, okay, against the work order that was approved for $24,000. And I have an open amount of $7,025. Okay. So based on the financial control settings, the invoice totals can never exceed the work order commitment total without a change order being approved. And then there's more granular controls as well, such as checking line item details, checking task level amounts. Some customers will validate invoices against the T&M portion separately from the unit portion. There's configurations to check the initial proposal value or invoiced amount separately from the change order. So there's a lot of different authorizations and configurations. Invoice also has auto approval rules or auto pay rules. So based on different types of settings, certain invoices can go through the info system and get auto approved based on maybe a dollar amount of the invoice if it's under a certain threshold. It could be based on the vendor type. Maybe it's a utility company and you want those invoices to get auto approved so the utility can get paid quickly. So there's auto approval rules that are available if your company is not currently using those. I just want to point that out. Okay, so we can easily check all those invoices against the work order amount and how much is open to date. We can also go into planning and come into balance, and I can look at my summary, and all those invoices that we're approving are considered life-to-date spending. So our total now is $19,195, and that approved expenditure is drawing down the balance of this plan. So usually the plan is a reserve for the site or an ARO if you're doing active decommissioning. Okay, so that process of doing a work order and approving invoices is directly related to the financial plan and the financial statement for this project. Okay, so I wanted to show that. And then my year-to-date spending, because this is all hitting in the current year, 2016, it's drawing down my current year budget. So I have 28,300 still left of the baseline budget of 47.5. Okay. The other thing that's happening is that still in my balance screen, I have a plan details section. And you can see that those invoices that I'm approving are showing up in the month of February, and they're drawing down the reserve balance as well. This is just a different way of stating the balance, but this is showing the month, the starting balance at the beginning of the month, the spend approved during that month, any adjustments approved that month, and then the final balance. Sorry about that. And then that number rolls forward. So that's the balance at the end of January rolls forward to the starting balance of February. The invoices I just approved were $3,195. So now we have a balance of $568. Okay. So again, I wanted to show how the expenditures and the work orders and the plans all integrate with each other in the Invoice Finance module. Okay, that ends the training other than some questions. So I'm going to have George go over some of the maybe most common questions, and then I'll repeat it so everybody can hear it, and then we'll give an answer.
We have some people that would like to see you enter a credit memo.
Okay. We can do that. So let's, are there some other questions that we might want to answer before we do that? So that'll take me a couple minutes.
Let's see.
I'll start getting prepared for that, by the way.
Will our invoice settings transfer from E2?
Yes. So the question was, will our invoice settings and our invoice rules transfer from Invoice 2 to Invoice 3? And the answer is yes. There won't be any changes necessary on any of the Invoice settings or configurations. And also the interfaces between Invoice and your accounts payable systems won't need to be changed. If you are a vendor and you're using EDI, those formats are not changing either. Okay.
How do you filter and sort the invoice table?
Okay, how do you filter and sort the invoice table? So let me go to that. So I'm going to go to Invoices. And we have a Set Filter button. So I'll click that, and it takes me into my filter. So again, I can put in different vendor companies. If I only wanted to see invoices for one vendor, I could select that. I could put in a specific invoice number or work order number, check number, backup document. I could go on status or reconcile status. Invoice amount, minimum. So maybe I only want to see my large invoices. So I could put in, these aren't large, but I could put in a range. And then I hit save. Okay. So now you can see that I lost in my view, lost is a bad word, I filtered out some of the invoices that were less than $1,000. right? Because I put in $1,000 as my min. But if I come up here and hit turn off, I'm seeing the invoices again that were under $1,000. So you need to be careful with this set filter, because you might actually think we're missing some invoices. If that's the case, you want to go in and check your filter. You can see that I have $1,000 as a min here. I could clear that filter or just continue to save it, but I could turn that filter off or on. Okay. So it's probably, I know a lot of people use that who work for the customer when they're looking at the different contractors and consultants or labs, and they want to filter their view for just one company's invoices at a time. All right, the one question was about a credit memo. I'll show you that really quick. I won't go through all the detail because we don't have time for that, but basically I would come in. The way I did it was I went to my proposal page. I can see all of the proposals and work that have work orders in the invoicing status. And I'm going to click Invoice. It's this next step that lets me say I want to do a credit memo. So instead of it, it's going to default to Invoice under this type, but I can hit credit memo here. Once I did that, now it's asking me for a credit memo number. So I have to put in a unique credit memo number. And it works the same way as the invoice. I'm going to go to Add Details. Okay, and now I can credit either my units or I can credit my T&M details. So maybe we have some direct labor, and I'm going to credit out $100. So I have a gross credit amount of $100. I could do the same thing on my units. I could add backup documents just like I did on my invoice. I could save it and come back and submit it or add documents later, or I could hit submit, which I'll do. So I submitted it, and if I come to my invoices table, I will see that I've got a credit memo. It's designated with a C. It's in the reviewing status, and you can see it's in parens, the amount, indicating that it's a credit. And then it's going to go through the review and approval or rejection process, just like an invoice would. And it will impact the balance of the work order, and it will impact the balance of the reserve plan or the ARO plan, depending on what kind of project type it is in your financial planning. Okay. Any more questions, George? We have a few more minutes.
Let's see.
What I'm showing here is going to give you a month-by-month bar chart of your spend for this particular project. So as we accumulate invoices against your AOC or your project node by project type, so in this case, I've got a remediation project type here, I can put my year in. I can go back in time to look at a full year, or I can use my current year, and it's going to build out my total approved invoices, and it's going to color code them by phase. So if I would have spent money in the preliminary assessment and in the feasibility study, it's going to be in the same bar, but it's going to be a stacked bar with a different color. So I can see my spend by phase in a stacked bar chart. And then as we add our months, it's just going to build that out. So it's going to make these less wide, the bars less wide as we add months. So you're going to be able to get a graphical representation of your spend by project type by month for any year in the history of the project or for the current year. And you can come in and you can download these images into different formats. You could save it as a CSV, or you could even annotate it on the fly if you want to add some annotation during a review meeting. Okay. Any other questions, George?
Like a credit memo, can you have a credit work order amount? I believe this would be like the re-estimate function.
Okay, the question was, like a credit memo on an invoice, do we have a way to credit on a work order amount? I'm not sure if we'll answer this correctly, but on to reduce a work order amount, we do have the re-estimate functionality that lets you lower the amount of an already approved work order. And you can do that on the T&M tasks, or on the fixed price tasks, or the units. You cannot lower it to a value that's less than what you've already billed, right? So if I had a $10,000 work order and I already billed $8,000, if I try to re-estimate it, I'm not going to be able to lower it to the 8 because I've already spent the 8. But you can lower it. When you do that, when you do a re-estimate and that goes through for its approval, that money that it was lowered by goes back into the available to commit total for that project plan. So that would be one reason why you might want to do a re-estimate. So it's not really a credit memo on the work order. It's a re-estimate to lower the approved work order amount. Okay. And then the work orders can be stopped and the work orders can be completed. We've reviewed that in a previous training session. If it's stopped, that means no more invoices can go against it until it's restarted. If it's completed, it can never be restarted again. It's basically closed and done, and no more invoices can ever be submitted against that work order. Any unspent money goes back into the available to commit on the plan balance. All right, we have just a couple more minutes, so we'll see if there are any other questions.
Can we re-estimate time and materials and raise units at the same time?
No. Tricky question. The question was, can we re-estimate a work order by lowering the T&M amount while adding to the unit amount at the same time? The answer is no. That's just not a functionality that we've designed or built or even contemplated. That would require a two-step process. You would need to do a re-estimate on your T&M, and then you would need to do a change order to that work order for your new units. So it'd be a two-step process to complete that action. It can just get too complicated when you allow too many moving parts on any one given transaction. So sometimes we do financial engineering to keep problems from occurring and trying to figure out what's happened on a transaction. So that's an example of that. We would rather see two separate transactions executed in parallel. I'm sorry, in sequence. You do one first and the second the other. All right, well, we're going to close down the invoices training. We have one more training session for the Invoice 3 finance module, and that's going to be on claims and cost recovery. That's going to be tomorrow afternoon. Just a reminder that in the Invoice Test 2 system, if you open up a new tab or you go to your home screen, you will see you'll have links to the videos of all these training sessions, we've got 3, or we actually, after this one, we have 4 more to go up. We have financial planning, we have proposals, we have purchases, and now we'll have invoices. Those videos will be going up on the site quickly. Those link to our YouTube page. So thanks everyone for attending, and we will talk to you later. Bye.